Hey everyone, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. This is an adult fiction alternate history novel centered around the premise of what if Hillary Clinton had not married Bill Clinton? What if she'd met him, had their relationship, gone up through her life just as she did in our world, up until the point where he proposed for I think like the third time and she said no and walked away. So that is the point where this novel deviates from our world and sort of becomes an alternate history about Hillary Clinton, or in this universe, Hillary Rodham's life and what happened to her after her breakup with Bill Clinton and how that would have changed our world. I read American Wife by Curtis Sittenfeld, which is essentially a biographical novel about Laura Bush. It's not technically about Laura Bush. Unlike in this book, the names are changed, the places are changed. It's changed enough that while Laura Bush is still recognizable in the character, she's not literally the character, and I thought that book was absolutely gorgeous. I thought it was a fantastic character study of this woman, and it was just like wonderfully crafted, just like a fantastic story. This book I was really expecting to love. I really thought it was going to give Hillary Clinton the same treatment, the same like really close character study that we had of Laura Bush. And I was really intrigued by that because Hillary Clinton is such a different person, has such a different public persona, like personality wise, she has very little in common with Laura Bush. And I was like really excited for that. That's what drew me into this book. This book isn't really like that. They're very different stories, even if the premise of like books about first ladies that have been fictionalized it is kind of similar. The books are so different that it's really hard to compare them. And unlike American Wife, I was actually really disappointed by this book. It was good. Like, I don't want to go into this being like, this book was garbage, I hated this book. No, I gave this 3 stars, and I did think it was a good book. However, my expectations and hopes for this book were so much higher. I didn't want to read a kind of okay, kind of decent, kind of mediocre book. I wanted to pick this up and absolutely adore it. I wanted to pick this up and see a really well done character of Hillary Clinton. Like, I wanted to pick this book up and really feel something for this woman, and I didn't really. The things I did enjoy were mostly at the beginning. I really loved seeing the young version of Hillary Clinton. I should start saying Hillary Rodham, but it sounds weird. And also, I'm bad at pronouncing her last name. I alternate between over pronouncing the H and not pronouncing it at all, which like but I did enjoy the beginning. I liked seeing the young version of Hillary. I liked seeing her really coming into her own, like in college, in law school. You really start to see who she was as a young person. And I mean, like, the fictionalized version. When I say Hillary, I'm going to be talking about the character of Hillary in this book, not the actual person, because even if they didn't deviate so much, this is a fictionalized version of her. Hillary did not sign off on this book, I assume. I'm pretty sure when I was looking up this book, I would have come across that bit of information, but this is just a reimagining of her character. I also really enjoyed the early relationship of Hillary and Bill, because I think it was so well done. Like, I like romances in books, and the way it was crafted between them was so cute and sweet and funny. And I mean, like, he's a garbage person in this book. And again, I'm going to keep my commentary on them solely to this book, because I don't want to just like delve into a bunch of politics here that I'm not knowledgeable enough to discuss. Like, I was not born when Bill Clinton was elected president, so I don't want to like discuss them as people. I'm just specifically talking about the book. But it was really lovely the way their relationship was written and the way it built up. Like, it was so well done and so well developed, and I really, really enjoyed that. And like, even after they broke up for a while, you still kind of got a little bit of both of them and who they meant to each other. And I think that was great. And I kind of wish that had been throughout the book. Because, like, even when you're broken up with someone, it's like you can still have that sort of connection. Like, it can still be a book about the relationship in a way, even if they have broken up. And this book kind of like dropped Bill Clinton for a good portion of it, where like, sure, the relationship breaking up mattered, but like his character didn't really have much influence over a good like half to third of this book, which I don't know. But I did like the beginning. I liked what that was building up. I liked the really close look you got at Hillary as the person, and I think that was really well done. I think in the beginning it was a little bit dialogue and exposition heavy. There was a lot of characters just like going on long streams of dialogue or having conversations that took up most of the page with very little narration in between the dialogue, which I didn't love. And I was kind of thinking that maybe that's just because this was the beginning of the book, and like after they broke up, it was really going to branch into this different universe and it was going to change in the writing style. And I was expecting it to be a lot more well done. But that wasn't like a huge issue. That was more of like a me reading this, really enjoying this book and having like this small complaint about the writing style. But then they broke up and kind of the book changed focus a lot, because up until that point, it really was a character study like American Wife. It was really about Hillary as the person, and that was what was driving the book. Well, Hillary is the person and her relationship with Bill. Those were kind of like the two things that were driving this book. But when they broke up, not only did you lose the relationship with Bill as the driving force, but it kind of felt like you also lost Hillary as the character. Like, after their breakup, I didn't really feel like we got any more close looks at Hillary as the person. From that point on, it was all about her political career, but it also wasn't very detailed in terms of her political career. It mostly felt like a summary. Like, you got the highlights, you got a few specific events within her political career, and then it sort of just like flitted from event to event, like covering the 30 years up until the 2016 election, which was like the other kind of main focus of the story. It really was kind of just the broad strokes of her political career, and really, really broad strokes, because it didn't really build things or unfold her life. It was kind of just like, oh yeah, in this election in like 92 or 91 maybe, she decided to run for Senate, and then she ran for president in 2000 maybe 2004, I forget, and then she ran against Obama in 2008, and there's that election, and then all of a sudden we're in 2016 and here's the main focus of the book again. And it really felt like we missed a lot of her character growth and development, and we just entirely skipped over who she was as a person. And we had gotten that when she was in her 20s, when she was in law school, and then after law school for a little while, her relationship with Bill. And then we sort of just like stopped caring about her character, was how it felt to me, which I really didn't like, because going into this book, that's what I wanted. I wanted a character study, and I also wanted the alternate history aspect, which I'll get into in a minute because I wasn't a fan of that either. But I was really looking for her character, for this really close look at her, and it felt entirely lacking in that regard. I really don't feel like I walked away from this book knowing Hillary is the main character, or even like knowing her anything beyond her public persona that we see in our world. Because you kind of get like that public persona aspect in her book, and it seemed kind of identical to the one we see now. Small changes like about her personal life, she's unmarried, she doesn't have kids, whatever, but like essentially her public persona remains the same, and that's kind of all you see of her in her adult life. Like, everything she said and thought in this book during her political career were things that I could really imagine Hillary saying like publicly. Like, it was all part of her public persona. And the thing I most wanted from this book was for it to dive deeper than that. Like, give us this idea of who she is as a person, like fictionalized, of course, because like we obviously can't know because everything she allows us to see is public persona by nature, but like make it up. You know, like give her this depth, because that was what American Wife did. And I don't for a minute believe that that's who Laura Bush is as a person, but that was the character that Curtis Sittenfeld created. And I was really looking for that depth of character here, and I don't feel like we got that at all, which like was the biggest failure of this book to me. I was so disappointed by that. Like, all I wanted was to see Hillary as a person, and I don't feel like she did that at all in this book. The second biggest critique that I have, like the other biggest critique I could say, these were the main two, and then I have some other small points. The alternate history aspect. For me, the purpose of an alternate history and what makes it interesting is a complete reimagining of the world stemming from one decision. And I mean, there are other aspects that you can get into in alternate histories, but for me and for this book, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for like this just complete reimagining and just all the little things, all the big things that had changed and the way in which the world was different. And I don't feel like we got that. So much of this book felt identical to our world, which was weird because I was expecting like very different things, like in terms of policy, in terms of like presidential campaigns, in terms of Hillary as the character. I was expecting so much different. And instead, it felt the same for the most part. Again, small details changed. Her name was different. She was unmarried. She didn't have a daughter. She had more of a political career starting earlier instead of like having Bill have his career first. And there were other big things that were changed, like Bill was never president. He wound up dropping out of that election because of accusations of infidelity. But so much of this book really did just feel ripped from reality, which was disappointing. Like, the 2008 campaign between Hillary and Obama was exactly the same as ours. Like, exactly. It was kind of summarized. We didn't spend tons of time on it, but it was strange to me that you have this different world. She has a completely different career, and yet it's exactly the same. In 2008, she runs against Obama in the primary. It's the same media coverage. It's the same outcome. She and Obama have the same relation. It's identical. And I hated that. Like, what is the point of writing an alternate history when you have these things that don't change? And like, it wasn't like Sittenfeld was making a point about the fact that it was the same. At least it did not feel that way to me. Maybe she was attempting to, but I don't think it was conveyed very well in the writing, if that was the point. It just seemed lazy. It seemed like, oh, well, this isn't the point of the book, so why would I bother changing anything? And it didn't feel like a whole lot of effort was put into, like, reimagining the world, which is kind of the point of an alternate history. Like, the world should be different as a whole, and instead it felt like Hillary the character was the same, and the world was largely the same, except for we got a list of the presidents and their vice presidents, and that list was different up until Obama and Joe Biden. Which I don't think it was done very well. I think the world itself needed a lot more time to like actually change things and actually feel realistic for the universe that we were in. Like, I didn't pick up this book to read a book about the exact same person in the exact same political situation. I picked up this book to read an alternate history about Hillary Clinton having her own political career, in a way. I mean, I know she did, but like, kind of this book was her political career at the expense of Bill's political career. And then you get into the 2016 election, which is different, and it feels like the only reason it's different is because the point of the story is that it's different. And the differences feel more like poking jabs at the reader and like, oh, look at this irony. Isn't it funny how this is different from reality, instead of like an actual genuine reimagining? And I need to stop saying the word reimagining. I know that, but I don't know what other word to use. But it really felt like, instead of actually creating a situation that felt real, it was more like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if instead of running against Trump, Trump was supporting Hillary? Like, wouldn't that be hilarious? And wouldn't it be so funny if the billionaire Hillary was running against was actually Bill Clinton, and it was his crowds who were chanting shut her up instead of lock her up? Like, I don't buy it, you know? I couldn't buy into that at all because there was so many things that were like, oh, haha, look how similar this is, but I added a little twist. It just seemed like it was trying to be the identical situation, just with Bill Clinton instead of Trump. And it just, I didn't enjoy it. Like, it felt like it was kind of mocking almost instead of being genuine. And I really wanted like this serious look, and I don't say serious in terms of like, let's dissect this, but serious in terms of like, I wanted it to feel like it mattered, and instead it just felt like I was kind of the butt of the joke here. Like, I was expecting a real book, and instead what I got was like an SNL skit almost, it felt like at times. Like, when Bill Clinton was acting the same way Trump was acting, when his crowds were behaving the same way Trump's crowds were behaving, when the media was treating him the same, and like, I don't know. It was like one of those things where like the differences didn't make sense in this world. It was like the point was solely to make it similar to our world, only with Bill Clinton. And I was so kind of over it, and just, I didn't buy into it. I wanted to like feel like this world was real, and it didn't. It didn't feel like a genuine attempt at a what if scenario so much as it felt like a kitschy twist on like the 2016 election. And like, I was so disappointed by that. Like, I don't know. This wasn't supposed to be like funny, you know? It wasn't supposed to be like a satirical thing. And it felt like it was almost leaning more towards that direction than like a real reimagining, than like a serious take on things that could have turned out different. Because I don't for a minute buy that that's the way the world would have turned up had Hillary and Bill not gotten married. And I don't know. I was so like almost disappointingly crushed by that. Onto the smaller, kind of less important issues, because those were definitely like the main two. I also kind of felt like this book lacked narrative. There wasn't much of a story here, and there wasn't enough of a portrait of a character to really have that be the driving force. Early on, it was definitely Hillary's character and Bill and Hillary's relationship. Then when they broke up, it just did become like that summary of her political career and her campaigns, but also like not a deep look at her campaigns. It was just surface level summary. The point was getting to the 2016 election so we could have like Bill Clinton, the billionaire's crowds, chant shut her up at his campaign rallies, and everything else sort of existed just to exist and get us to that point. And it needed more of a driving force in the second half or 2/3 of the book. It needed a lot more than just like, we're getting to the 2016 election, give us a minute to like sort of summarize everything else. It needed more. It needed more of a point. Like, it was just kind of like lackluster because it did meander, because there wasn't anything driving the book. And then my final point, the last thing I really wanted to discuss, because this video is getting a little bit lengthy, the way this book treated Hillary as the character. In my opinion, it failed to humanize her. I don't think it did great with her character. I don't think it did great with like the portrait of her as a person, but it also failed to criticize her. And I'm not saying it needed to criticize her, but I think it needed one of the two. I think it needed something, because there were so many things it brought up that were like negative things that she did. A lot of things to do with race, for example. At one point, this is just after the Anita Hill hearings on the Clarence Thomas Supreme Court trial. Is that the right word? When he was being nominated to the Supreme Court, whatever that's called. I'm sure it's said in this book, but you know. But after the Anita Hill hearings, Carol Moseley Braun decides to run to be the first African American female senator, and she runs in Illinois. In this book, Hillary was planning to run, saw that she was running and was like, maybe I won't. Then was like, hey, I think her campaign's not doing well. I think I will run. And in the book, she actually loses a close African American friend over it. She actually like faces a little bit of criticism over that, like both within like the characters of the book, but also the narrative. And it's like just touched on it ever so briefly and then kind of dropped it. And she has justification for doing it because she did think the campaign was doing poorly and she did think that Braun wasn't going to win. In real life, Braun won that election and became the first female African American senator in the US. And like it was a very big deal, especially just after the Anita Hill hearings. And because of that, I do feel like if they were going to bring it up and write it like that, or if Sittenfeld was going to bring it up and write it like that it deserved more time and criticism and discussion. Like, not to villainize Hillary, but like the opposite, to humanize her, to really like see where she was coming from if it was like an entirely purely selfish decision, if she didn't care about what Braun's election would mean, or if she genuinely believed that her campaign was going to fail. I think we needed one of the two. I think we needed more insight into that, because that is something 100% made up for this book. Hillary never ran against Braun because in that time period, Bill was getting ready to run for president, or he already had, or something. I forget the exact timing on that. But it was like around the same time, like Bill was governor of Arkansas. Arkansas? I was not yet born, so any of my historical inaccuracy or timeline inaccuracy due to that. But it was made up for this book, so I really wanted there to be more discussion on that, because it felt like a topic that really deserved more time. And there were a few things like that. Like, she makes some comments during the Obama race where she lost, and she winds up commenting with some friends that like, oh, I guess like sexism is worse than racism in this country. And it's like, it's a little more complicated than that. And for how much it focuses on her in the Obama race and the sexism she experienced in that, it has like absolutely zero criticism or mention of the racism that Obama experienced during that. And it felt very like swept under the rug. Like, if you're going to have the characters say and do these things, there needs to be more discussion on it, either like criticism or something. Like, I want these topics to be brought up, not just kind of like briefly mentioned and like glossed over, because it felt like they deserved and needed so much more time to be like really delve deeper into. Like, and that would have been better for her character, like positive or negative. I'm not saying like I want this to be like a character assassination of Hillary Clinton. Like, I'm not saying that at all. I just wanted to see her as a person, and I feel like the good and the bad. And I feel like had this book really delved into these issues, you would have seen more of her as a person. You would have seen a lot more of her as a person. But I genuinely don't know why she did the things she did in this book. I don't know why she ran against Carol Moseley Braun. Like, I don't know if it was selfish. I don't know if she genuinely thought she was going to lose. I don't know. And I think that's a failure in the book. I should know. And I feel like there should be a lot more discussion on these things that are mentioned in the book. Overall, I just don't think this was a very well thought out book. I don't think Hillary's character was well thought out. And I don't think the world post her and Bill breaking up was well thought out. It just seemed like it needed a lot more time and a lot more thought going into it to really like craft what this was supposed to be. Because I feel like I was so disappointed because it sounded so good and there's such potential for this book, and it was just kind of lacking in every aspect for me. And I don't think it contributed anything to really any discussion. I think it was well written. I think the relationship between Bill and Hillary was great, and I think there were some great elements in here that I enjoyed. But I wanted to love this. I wanted this to be a great book that I could like push on people the way like I think American Wife was kind of a masterpiece of literature and a masterpiece of a character study, because that's what that book is. And I was so excited for Hillary to get the same treatment, like in a very different way, but I wanted that portrait of Hillary as the character, and we failed so much to get that. I was disappointed. I honestly couldn't recommend this book, I don't think. I think if someone really wants to read it, like, go for it. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a good book. I think it's maybe worth the read if you're really interested and curious, but I wouldn't be pushing this book on people just because it just felt lacking in almost every way. Like, not terrible in any way, just not great in a lot of ways, and only good in the rest. So I don't know. This book made me sad. I wanted to love this. I really thought going in it was going to be a favorite, but I wanted to film a review because I did have a lot of thoughts and a lot of things I wanted to discuss, you know, based on the absurd length of this video, at least in the raw footage. So yeah, 3 stars for this. A very sad, honestly disappointing read for me. I'll still read more Curtis Sittenfeld because American Wife was amazing and I'd highly recommend that, but kind of lukewarm on this one at best, which is very, very unfortunate. Let me know down below if you've read Rodham and what you thought of it if you have, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.